Hello, everybody. This is Rowan,
This is Rachel.
and we're going to talk about a small passage from this book called.
Meditations on the Tarot.
And Rachel is going to read a passage.
Okay. Do you not also experience, dear unknown friend, a feeling of discomfort each time that you encounter a formula stating the higher attributes of the Holy Trinity, such as power, wisdom, love, or being, consciousness, beatitude? Subject Ananda. Personally, I always experienced this discomfort, and it was only later, many years later, that I understood its cause. It is because God is love that He admits of no comparison, that He surpasses all power, wisdom, and even being. One can, if one wishes, speak of the power of love, the wisdom of love, and the life of love in order to make a distinction between the three persons of the Holy Trinity. But one cannot put on the same level love on the one hand and wisdom, power, and being on the other. For God is love, and it is love, it is only love, which by its presence gives worth to power and to wisdom and to being itself. For being without love is deprived of all worth. Being without love would be the most appalling torment, the inferno itself.
Well, that is an excellent passage, and I would like to start this discussion off with what he means by being and what he means by love. So, do you have anything to comment on that, Vanya?
Well, how I understood it is like love kind of presupposes a relation. So, what it's kind of trying to point out is even before being, there is a relation. Only when there's a relation, there's being. So, a kind of relationship has primacy over being. So, it's kind of saying you can't be yourself without another person for you to love and to be loved, right?
Precisely.
Mm,
And secondly, I would like to strip it off its theological context and
mm,
language, and then to talk about the very feeling of discomfort.
mm.
What makes us uncomfortable? What is this discomfort about? Let's talk about it from a very concrete human existential perspective.
What kind of are you talking about the discomfort of thinking about the Trinity?
Not the discomfort of talking about the Trinity or thinking
Mm,
about the Trinity, rather the
mm,
discomfort we experience when somehow
mm,
in our ordinary existence we
mm,
are addressed as in relation to our function
mm,
or to our beauty as such,
mm,
and not through love, but
mm,
you know what I mean.
mm,
You're addressed through something else which is not love,
mm,
and that something else becomes our primary identity.
mm.
So isn't that the cause of all forms of discomfort we face in our daily existence?
Or rather anxieties, right? Because we are we are identified once we're identified with certain aspects, and I say, and we're told your being is this and this and this, then it is when it's defined for us, we feel like we have to function within that. But if we think of ourselves as before beings of a being that loves and is loved, then we realize that the anxiety is like we're trying to function and trying to impose a kind of being on ourselves, which we aren't necessarily are, right? Mm,
Exactly. So we want to somehow fit into the definitions,
mm,
and to use another
mm,
language, a form
mm.
of um, I, the cybernetic language of what's that? Coming back to yourself, right?
Information
Information
flow kind of
flow,
thing.
yeah.
Mm,
So it's like you're
mm,
caught up within a particular flow, system of
mm,
flows,
mm,
and that system of flows is defining you in many
mm,
different ways
mm,
in relation to power, in
mm,
relation to wisdom, in relation to being, in relation to something else
mm,
other than love, not include
mm,
by the system in which we abide
mm,
as the beloved, the
mm,
one who's loved,
mm,
primarily as the one who's loved.
mm,
But love becomes this kind of a
mm,
accident.
mm.
Love becomes a kind of a
It's
You
also
know,
romanticized and sexualized, right?
romanticized, sexualized, but
Mm,
at best,
mm,
it is just a small little power flickering at the edge of all these great,
mm.
attributes and being, of being.
What
So,
this reminds me of is actually like in popular psychology today, there, there's a lot of like, what do you do when someone is suffering? And the best advice a psychologist will give you is listen and do not speak. So you have to like listen. Why? Not so that you can fix the person's problem, but you want to make them feel heard. I think what they're essentially saying is love another person,
mhm,
love the person who suffers. But
mhm,
they can't say that because within love, one aspect of that love
mhm.
is listening and showing that the person is heard, right? So there is, then I would say, although those kinds of aspects, like contact aspects, are imposed on being, what we essentially are seeking is love.
Yeah. So, that is where
Mm,
the discomfort and the problem lies,
mm,
because we are not addressed through that love in this world.
mm,
And so the next
mm,
dimension I would say is,
mm,
how do we kind of get to that point where
mm,
we have the strength enough to hold on to our identity as the one, primarily as the one who's loved,
mm,
despite all the other forces that operate around us.
mm,
So,
mm,
isn't that an actual challenge?
mm,
Because it has repercussions
mm,
to human flourishing,
mm,
to mental health and
mm,
to all kinds of other,
mm,
issues
mm,
that you could come up with,
mm,
even in terms of how we relate to each other
mm,
and how the world addresses its own problems, so on and
mm,
so forth.
mm,
So, isn't this the there's a
mm,
twofold
mm,
quest problem that I'm trying to raise here.
mm,
A, the problem is that we don't. How do we identify ourselves as the
mm,
beloved, the one who's loved primarily?
mm,
B, how do we make changes
mm,
in society, you
mm,
know,
mm,
to address each
mm,
person as the beloved,
mm,
as the one who was loved? Because we are
mm,
far from even, like
mm,
raising this question, because I don't know how
mhm,
many people raise this question about the primacy of love over even
mm,
truth,
mm,
even beings, because without love, truth is tyrannical. And
mm,
then I especially like this that point where he says the most appalling term is being without love
mm. It's the
is the
infernal itself.
is the inferno. It's torture, because
Mm,
you know maybe we don't feel pain, but at the same time
mm,
we're deprived of something essential in
mm,
ourselves,
mm,
and somehow we silently suffer
mm,
through life,
mm,
and this silent suffering gives rise to all kinds of problems, interpersonal problems and
mm,
financial problems and so on and so forth, mental health problems. And
mm,
so, are we close to addressing all
mm,
these problems? Is my question.
mm. I find it very hard too because I don't know what it is to be loved. I think that's the I don't maybe even if I had to give myself a little bit of self love, like they say self care and whatever. But like how do you love yourself? Because the commandment of Christ was love thy neighbor as thyself. So if one cannot love oneself, how does one know like so essentially if you don't know what it means to be the beloved, how do you love another?
Yeah, see, that is the problem that I think we should leave
Mm,
our viewers with, because this is a challenge, because there's no answer.
mm,
How do we love ourselves? Where do we begin loving ourselves?
mm,
And then where do we begin loving our neighbor, loving the world, loving everything?
mm,
There's this beautiful quote by Dostoevsky, he says, "Love
mm,
everything."
mm,
I think I'd like to look that up.
mm.
He says, "Sorry for the delay, guys. It's taking its own time." He says, Love the animals, love the plants, love everything. If you love everything, you will perceive the divine mystery in things. Once you perceive it, you will begin to comprehend it better every day, and you will come at last to love the whole world with an all embracing love. Isn't this the goal of science? Shouldn't, like,
Mm.
the goal of science is not knowledge, because if knowledge is the goal of science, then knowledge in itself without love
Mm.
is a problem because it's impersonalized. It
Mm.
treats the universe as a kind of an object.
Mm.
It begins with that perception, that presupposition. So, goal of all science, goal of all knowledge, goal of all activities, human activities, should
Mm.
be love.
Mhm.
And if it's not directed towards love as the ultimate end,
Mm.
then we are somehow creating infernos.
Mm.
And so I would like to leave our readers, our listeners with this thought. Thank you very much. Bye bye.